Recording in progress.
Okay, hello everyone and welcome to the Key Stage 3 information evening. As you could hear through the little echo there, we will be recording, so that's just for anyone who is unable to make it today, that they can watch it at a later date, and also for yourselves as well. If there's any more information that you want to look back on and review, then you can do. So just an outline first of all then, some of the things that I'm going to be talking to you about this evening. Obviously the assessment policy, that's the kind of focus really, helping us to understand that in terms of your children and their progress reviews. The key progress indicators that will feed into that for the different core subjects for maths, English and science. The different aspects that we will be doing in terms of literacy and numeracy to help support those key progress indicators. How we'll work on closing the gaps with students both in school and at home. How the homework through the VLE and Century can support that, and any other strategies as well for you to do both at home and supporting them with their intervention. Okay, so if I just ask first of all, if everyone could mute themselves so that there isn't that echo in the background, then that would be great. Thank you very much. Okay, so first of all then, we have introduced our SPH Key Stage 3 assessment policy with the view really that this places the child at the centre of all of our assessment, focusing on developing their sense of responsibility for their own progress and for their own achievement. And it's obviously a structure we think is effective, accurate and consistent, and a framework that will aid our interventions and overall enhance student progress. So the primary purpose of assessment, as you may know, is to provide valid and reliable information about whether pupils are successfully learning the intended curriculum. Now, the curriculum, of course, will be different depending on the student, depending on the subject area in terms of the knowledge and skills that they need to know. And obviously, we'll take all of those things into consideration, particularly the different pathway for each individual child. And the assessment should always provide information about whether pupils can remember what they've been learning in terms of their appropriate curriculum and how that's stored in the long-term memory. Now, progress is defined as the extent to which a pupil or pupils have learned and how successful they are at learning their intended curriculum. So if pupils are successfully learning the curriculum, then obviously we would be suggesting that they are making progress. Now, on the right hand side here, you can see the 4-point scale that will be used for students reporting. So on their data drops, this is what they will be getting. Now, obviously you had the introduction to that last year, and obviously this will be the plan moving forward now throughout the whole of year 7, year 8 and year 9 as well. And hopefully it should be a lot more streamlined for the children to understand and for yourselves to understand as well. So for a number 1, if they get a number 1 on their report, then we would be saying that children are successfully learning all or nearly all of the curriculum. So that's super impressive, and they would be perhaps above track for where they need to be moving forwards. If they have a number 2 on their progress review, then they are successfully learning most of the curriculum. They're demonstrating a good understanding of both the knowledge and skills, and there may be an occasional gap, but obviously they're working towards addressing that. Number 3 would be that they're successfully learning some of the curriculum, and they're kind of progressing at a satisfactory way, and they're understanding the knowledge and skills, but there may be a number of gaps that do need to be addressed in order to get where they need to be. And finally, a number 4 is that they're not successfully learning the curriculum. There are significant gaps and they're not where they need to be or where they are expected for their particular curriculum and their ability. So obviously you can track and you can monitor and you can see how your child is doing in relation to those 4 different numbers all the way throughout Key Stage 3. Obviously, it's not necessarily a concern if perhaps you have a child that is working at a 2 and they're consistently working at a 2. That means obviously they're learning new knowledge, but they're still accessing that, they're still remembering it, and they are still learning it. So it's not a concern if you don't see them progressing from a 2 or a 1. It's that they are consistent in what they are learning across the curriculum. Now, obviously, we spent a lot of time in the way that we've considered our assessment policy and how we would feed back to parents. So there are 3 progress points throughout the year, and each different subject area that will be dependent upon the subject or curriculum time that they have. But they should be aiming towards formative assessments, which is basically where there'll be a dialogue and comments and advice offered by the teacher for what the child needs to do to improve. And then obviously there'll be the summative assessments as well that will be towards normally the end of the term. And that will give a greater outline, not only just of the aspects, the skills and knowledge that they need to improve on, but also in terms of their grade or their marks on that particular assessment. Okay, so obviously we don't have grades in the same way as where we used to. So students used to have a target grade right the way through from Key Stage 3 all the way to the Key Stage 4. And they don't have that because we thought that in many ways, certainly for students that had a higher target of a grade 8, perhaps, that seemed a little bit daunting when they were starting in year 7 to understand what exactly they needed to do. And obviously if it was a skills-based subject, that would take them quite a bit of time to develop those skills all the way up to Key Stage 4. So we felt that it would be better to acknowledge what they're actually doing in relation to each subject and across the whole curriculum in terms of accessing, learning and remembering what they need to. So obviously we take into consideration the target setting, and we assess and standardise this. There is then, of course, all of the data entries and the reporting, and that's quality assured with the head of department in each different curriculum area. And so we spend a lot of time looking at those different grading between 1 to 4 to say whether we think that that is accurate, to ensure that is fair for the individual child. And then of course that is sent home to parents so that you can see and you can review and you can have those discussions with form tutors, with class teachers or heads of year. And obviously we celebrate that in our rewards at the end of each half term or term. And of course then you'll have your assemblies and the postcards home, and obviously you can celebrate when you see your child's data drop and their progress review at the end of those 3 progress points throughout the year. Now, in order to monitor your child's progress across all of the different subjects, there are some key aspects that we say across all areas of the curriculum, and it's to ensure that they are learning lifelong skills to aid them in their future development. And these are the main things that we want to focus on. So in terms of vocabulary and spelling, that students are successfully learning and retaining all or most of the key terms, the vocabulary and spellings. And that is assessed in all different curriculum areas when they have key term tests. And on that, they will have a range of different tier 2 and tier 3 vocabulary. And that incorporates more complex vocabulary that will aid their development in terms of their articulacy, but also in terms of their written work, as well as key terms which are subject specific terminology. So words perhaps say to do with science, photosynthesis, that they would need to learn to remember to be able to use and apply. And obviously in that we'll be checking the spelling of those as well. So it's all the time that we're building on what knowledge and skills they need in order to develop moving forward right the way through. So it's this kind of holistic and spiraled approach all the way up from Key Stage 3 to Key Stage 4, and constantly revisiting and making sure that the knowledge is sticking in their long-term memory. Obviously for the knowledge then there'll be specific aspects that are applicable to each different subject area, and we would suggest that how much knowledge the children are retaining is to how successful they are in their curriculum. So obviously you can see the key words that are coming up and cropping up all the way throughout. So students are successfully learning and retaining all or nearly most of the key knowledge that they need to as well. And of course then the skills, they've got to be able to apply their knowledge in order to show how successful they are in that particular area, and how, say for instance in English, obviously it's not beneficial just to know the language techniques. They've got to be able to analyze the language techniques, and then they've got to be able to use the language techniques in their own writing as well. So that's applying their knowledge and showing it and evidencing it in their skills as well. And then finally, as you will be aware, students do their directed improvement and reflection time in lessons following assessments. And basically what that does is it provides the children with an opportunity through reteaching. So the teacher will mark the assessments, the students will get individual feedback for those assessments with specific aspects to do with knowledge or the skills that they need to work on. The teacher will reteach those different aspects. And then they will have some time to reflect and to go back to that piece of work and improve it so that they can evidence where they've made mistakes and how they've rectified them moving forwards. Now, in terms of science, English and maths, I'm going to talk you through the key skills and the things that students need to know and be able to do as well there. Okay, so as you can see, in the yellow on the left-hand side, the student is able to explain their ideas using prior knowledge to explain new concepts. So it's again that idea of taking prior learning and applying it in new situations. They have to know the scientific theories. They have to be able to select appropriate apparatus that would be beneficial to the experiment that they're carrying out and to gather meaningful results from that. In addition, they have to be able to interpret and formulate their accurate conclusions in response to their results. And finally, they have to be able to evaluate the validity of the results and the processes that they undertook. And these are the common things, the common indicators all the way throughout Key Stage 3 for science that students should be working on and ensuring that they're developing and moving forward, showing their progress. Okay, so if you have a look on the right hand side then, and like I say, I will provide this PowerPoint for you. And again, like I say, you'll have the recording if you want to. You can see the key aspects of knowledge and then the skills on the right hand side. So much of the time it's the things they need to know and then how they can apply that in their description, in their explanation, or in the actual activities and tasks that they need to do. So you can look back through these, like I say, and if you want to talk to your child about these and kind of say to them, well, do you know what it means by particle arrangement? Do you know what organelles are in cells and so on? Then obviously you can constantly keep prompting and reminding them that they should know these things. And if they're struggling, they don't, then obviously it prompts them to kind of go on to a little bit more independent learning at home and what they can do to kind of learn and ensure that that is sticking. In terms of maths then, it's about the strong understanding of the content so that they can apply that in their mathematical processes and their working out. So one of the key aspects for maths obviously is not necessarily if they get an answer wrong, you know, I've got it wrong, and the children kind of often focus in on that, don't they? And they worry, well, I've got this wrong, but they don't think about what it is that has made them get to that point. So it's obviously doing their working out, showing out their process and being able to explain and reason with how they need to change that to get the answer right in the end. So what process do they need to take to get there? And then of course, it's about applying that to the context in which they're using their mathematical processes as well. So there'll be certain aspects of knowledge that they can apply to different aspects and different questions, and that would still be relevant. So obviously you can see that down the left-hand side for the aspects that students must know. So measures, decimals, algebra, expressions, equations and so on, and much of those feed into the skills that you can see on the right hand side and how they would go about applying those as well. Now the student must embed a good number of key mathematical terms. On the CUSP bookmark that all students should have in their planners, there are some of the key measurements that children should know and should learn, but of course obviously it's wider than that as well, and obviously it depends upon whether they're going for the higher as they move on and progress throughout Key Stage 3 up into Key Stage 4 as well. For English, these are some of the key progress indicators. So reading fluency is something that we're spending quite a lot of time moving from now and moving forward in terms of children's speed, their accuracy and their expression. Now, obviously, lots of research has gone into the importance of reading fluency. Now, in particular, it has been noted that in the GCSE papers, or even in the Key Stage 3 papers, the GL assessments that we do, that much of the vocabulary vocabulary and the reading material that they need, particularly in, say, science, is very high order. So even the reading age for much of the science tests that they will do is perhaps even harder or more sophisticated than English. So you can see how it is so important that reading fluency, has a significant impact on the overall understanding and application of the whole curriculum. So one thing that you can do with children at home in terms of reading fluency is you can assess their speed. That can seem a little bit intimidating at first. So how many words can they read per page, or how many words can they read per minute? The more you practice it, the quicker they should be getting. And that will obviously aid them with the content, the amount that they need to read, and how quickly they need to read as they progress throughout Key Stage 3. In terms of accuracy, that includes how they use punctuation, so the pauses in the correct place, the use of expression and intonation, if a character has a piece of dialogue and so forth, that they are putting the tone of voice on in place so that they fully understand and comprehend it. And that enables them or aids them to be a confident, independent reader and to be much more insightful in their approach, and then later becoming much more accomplished as well. The accelerated reader program is something that we start right from year 7. Lots of the primary schools use this as well, and it's highly effective, and we've had lots and lots of significant impact on this. All children in year 7 and 8 should have an accelerated reader book, and a good proportion of year 9 do as well, because we've carried it through since lots of children were learning from home remotely last year, and we haven't had the same input from the accelerated reader program there, so we wanted to carry it on through to year 9 for a number of children as well. Now in that, every single child should have their own accelerated reader book, which is based upon their baseline test. It will give them a reading age and a reading score, as well as the skills that they need to develop. Class teachers have all of that information, so they're continually pushing and driving that. But as well, what you could be doing for your own child is to ensure that at home they are regularly reading that, and they do always bring it into school every single day as well. For writing then, of course, it's the drive for it to be consistently clear, and then moving on to becoming much more convincing in their approach and their tone and their purpose. And then finally, in their spoken language, it's about expressing their challenging ideas, but in a more clear and then confident way. And that's why all the way throughout English, we do a holistic approach to reading, writing and speaking and listening. And it's always building on those skills so that they don't get to GCSE or to college and they have to do formal presentations and so on. And then they have that kind of fear and worry and concern. We're trying to build those skills up all the way throughout Key Stage 3. And again, of course, English is a little bit different in that it is, a much more skills-based subject. So you can see along the left-hand side, the knowledge feeds directly into the skills. So obviously, if they don't know the vocabulary or how to spell it, then they won't be able to apply it and use it. If they don't know the different sentence structures, then they won't be able to apply it in their own writing again. So it's really important that they know those things so that they can apply it in their own reading and writing as well. Now, some key resources that we do have. So at the top, you can see in the yellow, those are all of the resources that we suggest across all of the different curriculum areas. So BBC Bitesize, Oak Academy, that the kind of ability to access that probably will only be provisionally until the end of this academic year. So we are suggesting try and make the most of that as much as possible this year. Seneca is another option that's free, and that has all different subjects, so students can log on and use that themselves, or they can be set it by the class teacher as well. We have lots of different revision guides. Now these are some of the ones that are used at GCSE, but they do have Key Stage 3 versions as well. So CGP, and they're very good, very detailed, very thorough, and they're at a discounted rate if you want to get them through school, or if you wanted to buy them yourselves immediately, then you can do from the website. And they have flashcards and little knowledge organisers and things like that as well. And Collins have snap revision guides. So if your child may be a bit more reluctant to read some of the heavier going content and material, these are just quick, easy, key knowledge that children need to know. For maths, again, you can see there some of the key websites that the maths department are recommending. And for science as well. Now, science do have their own science website that they have set up, and we'll send you the link out for that. And that's got the specific content and the resources that the science department are driving and pushing for children to read and learn. And then for English, in terms of literature, Spark Notes and Lit Charts, sorry, are really good all the way through from Key Stage 3 to Key Stage 4. And then some of the suggestions that we often say in terms of reading, again, for the higher order and more the literary heritage texts, which are kind of more Victorian and so hard to read some of those independently. So we often suggest listening to the audiobooks on YouTube, and that can be a really helpful way of digesting and understanding the text a little bit easier, more fluently at home. Now, if you wanted to get a bit more information about each of the individual subject areas, then you can go onto the school website. And at the top here, where it says curriculum, it's got the different subject areas. So it's got an outline of our curriculum, first of all, and what the intent is and how that we plan to implement that in lessons through teaching and learning, but then also as well how each of the different subject areas arrange and organize their topics and their sequencing. So you can have a look at those, and also some of the assessments are outlined on there as well. In school, in order to close some of the gaps, one of the strategies that we have taken on as a school, but also as a trust, is to use GL assessments. And these are highly tailored reports that are really focused in on different skills and knowledge that are applicable to each different subject area. You can see at the top that it will provide us as a school with the kind of different categories that the children fit into in terms of the comparisons nationally. But also in terms of their STAININES and their standard age scores. So that's more internal information for us in suggesting nationally where they would fit. And they're kind of, with that, it will provide what they suggest this student might be working forward and what they might be aiming for at GCSE. But what's more important perhaps for the class teacher and for the individual student is that it breaks it down into each individual question so that we can go back over this and we can teach it as well. And we can see specifically what aspects that the children are really struggling on. And so once a child has done their GL assessments in English, maths or science, then they can have that individual discussion with their class teacher and say, Miss or Sir, what is it that I particularly need to work on? And you yourselves as parents and at parents' evening, you can say, following the GL assessments, is there something that you think my child could be working on or I can help them with at home? So you can see there just the breakdown of the questions for English, the categories that it fits into, and then the specific aspects about those questions as well that individual struggled with or needed to work on. So it is really helpful, and it gives us a really, really detailed outline right from the very beginning of Year 7 of what key aspects we can help and work on moving forward for each individual. Now, also in terms of that, we have spent a lot of time this year thinking in particular about how we can address the gaps in learning and obviously help to catch children up post-pandemic in terms of getting them back into school and getting them to where they need to be. So we've addressed through those assessments amongst in-class assessments as well, the different aspects, and then we've provided some of the children, and this will rotate throughout the year, of all of the different children in the different subject areas that may require, just for a short period, some catch-up intervention. And so we've appointed a catch-up tutor to support this. Children will be coming out of other subject areas just for a short period. For maths and science, it perhaps may be, say, 3-4 weeks. English, because it is skills-based, maybe a little bit longer for a half term. We try not to impact the other subjects too much, so it should be varied, and it should be different subjects over the 2-week timetable. But what we'll do is we'll review how children are doing in that intervention. Once we feel like we're happy and they have achieved that, then they will come out of the intervention, go back to class, and then we'll rotate it and pick up the next cohort of children as well. Now, all Year 7 and 8 have additional literacy and numeracy lessons, and that is focused on the Accelerated Reader Programme for literacy, but also the targeted support for TT Rockstars in terms of timetables and basic numeracy and so forth as well. As I mentioned to you, every subject area will be doing knowledge quizzes and key term tests to make sure that that is always sticking in the short term and then in the long term memory. And then one aspect that will be really helpful for yourselves at home is that at the moment we are working on our knowledge organisers. So that basically is a mat, a learning mat, that will help children to learn the key aspects that they need to in terms of each different subject area and in terms of each different topic. Now, in the new year, we are aiming to put all of these onto the VLE for each different subject area and also onto the school website as well. So I'll just show you an example of one of these. So this is a computer science one. And on there, you can kind of see the rationale behind what they're doing in that topic, how it links to other aspects of the curriculum in terms of literacy and numeracy, any extra reading and so on. So you can see that and the child can see, what is it for this particular topic am I learning and why is it so important? And then on the back of that, it's got the key aspects of knowledge and the things that, you know, visually would aid them to learn that. So as you can see on the top here, one of the processes dual coding, and that's a proven strategy that using images will help children to remember some of these key terms, some of these key bits of information as well. So all of these will be available in the new year for all different subject areas, for all different topics, and you can use those, you can test the children at home before they have their formal assessments and try and support them with some of that as well. In terms of the key vocabulary and the key terms, students will be using these sheets in class, and so they'll be introduced at the beginning of the topic, and they can see whether they already know some of those key terms or if they're just familiar with it. And if they don't know any at the beginning, that's absolutely fine. Then we will tell them and we will talk them through that, and we will help them to use it and to learn it all the way throughout that topic. And then, of course, we'll revisit it at the end of that topic. And there has been a significant improvement actually in the knowledge retention of this, about 30% improvement we've seen by doing these in the different subject areas, that children are learning them much more by the end of that topic. And you can see just there a bit of research. It can take up to as many 17 different exposures or 17 times for a child to see a word in its context to fully understand and fully remember it. So obviously that's a lot really. And if they only ever see it once or twice, then it's going to be much more difficult in the long run for them to remember and to learn that moving forward. Okay, now some strategies in terms of reading that could help you and that you could be doing with your children at home. I'll just talk you through some of these, and then obviously with their accelerated reader books, or anytime they're reading at home, then you could have a go at doing some of these strategies with them as well. So obviously when they're reading, it's really helpful to notice any patterns and any text structures. So for instance, in terms of Private Peaceful, one of the texts that we study in year 8, in there there's different narrators. So they'll read one chapter and it's one character, and then they'll read another chapter and it's another character, and it goes back and forth between the different characters. And so it's important to notice that and to think about what the patterns are. So with the one character, it's all dark, evil, sinister, and so on. And with the other character, it's much more positive and so forth. And then for them to think about what's the rationale behind that. Why did the writer do that? Well, it gives you two different perspectives, doesn't it? It helps you to see the trustworthy, reliable aspect, but also, what is kind of perhaps put forward in a biased way, and talk that through. In terms of skimming, and this is really appropriate for any time that they're reading any text that they're unfamiliar with, but they want to get an overview of the text. So I want you to skim through that, and I want you to find me. I want you to skim through that, and I want you to tell me what the overall topic of that text is. I want you to tell me what the overall message of that text is. So you've read that chapter. What was the point in it? If you can tell me in your own words. Scanning is where you might say, can you find me a specific part of information? So if they're reading a book, for instance, and I don't know, it's a story about a monster attacking someone or something like that, they might say, what can you find me all of the specific parts to do with the monster, or all of the specific parts to do with the reactions from the monster? Summarizing is a really powerful tool to check understanding. So for instance, then you might say, can you just break that down and tell me in 5 points what can you understand from that key text there, and see if what they have said is accurate and does make sense. Try to ask them questions throughout to make it active. So often children will either race through a story just so that they've read it aloud. They want to get done with that piece of reading. But if you ask them the questions throughout it, you'll check that they are understanding at different points. Read the related text, so link to wider context. So what's this like? What's this similar to that you've read before? Does it link to something? Is it familiar in terms of context? So is it written in the Victorian times? Was it written in the Elizabethan times? What do you know about those different aspects? Now, I'm just going to make you aware that obviously it may cut out in about 2 minutes. So you'll need to log back in and use the same password. Okay, so in a couple of minutes we will cut out, but then you'll have to log back in as you did just for this one. Okay. Choral reading then. So that's where you might read together. So obviously that helps someone who, if a child is stumbling over their words when they're reading, if they're reading too quickly, if they're not reading with expression, if you read with them at the same time, that can help with that. Echo reading is where you might read a paragraph and you model the pauses, the punctuation, the intonation, and then of course they can read it back to you and show that they're mirroring that kind of reading and response. Pre-teach the vocabulary. So if you know when you're reading with them, there's certain words that they're not necessarily going to understand and it's going to be difficult whilst they're reading. If you say to them, well, this word, I know that you're probably not familiar with this, but this could mean this. Can you put that in a sentence of your own? And then when they come to read it, they'll have a much better understanding of it. Pronouncing and repeating. So with that, I would suggest breaking down the words phonetically or into syllables. So they can understand the sounds with that and talking through, so if you have EA, does that change the sound when you read it together, and so forth. Modeling the tone and expression, like I've said, and pauses, punctuation. Sometimes one of the things that's really difficult for some children is the kind of imaginative aspect, or trying to really understand and picture. So if you say to them sometimes, I'm going to read this to you, and then I want you to visualize, I want you to try and imagine, and then I want you afterwards to see if you can remember and explain it in your own words. And then another strategy to support that is predicting. So you might say to them, what can you tell me you think will happen later on when you read this text? So that bit, there's a bit of information there. What do you think will happen as a result of that later on at the text? Link it and compare to other texts and see how they can react or respond to that. What does it make you think, feel, or react like? And can you empathise with that character, or can you empathise with the narrator or the writer of the text? Okay, and I will stop there because that's a good point to break. And then, like I say, if everyone just logs back in, then that would be fantastic. And I'll see you in a minute.